putting the lever back in place for the flash sink selector, self-timer selector, first I've got to lubricate two spots. One is on this detent spring here in the case, and the second is on the selector lever itself. There's a little ratchet piece here. I just run a little bit of molybdenum paste on there, and this can be fitted in position. Now the pin on here needs to go behind that spring, which you can see if I can get this in a useful position. Yes, you can just see it there. You can see the spring through the hole there. The pin needs to go here behind that spring. That will ensure that the lever is spring tensioned. That's good. The shim. We had a shim here that only goes on in one direction. It's got a little locating tab on it. That sits on there. And the aperture setting lever sits on here and couples with that setting ring. There's a post on the setting ring in the back there that comes through, and this is held in place with three small screws which are currently doing their best to get away in the traditional fashion. I'll get that one started. That's fine. I'll just tighten that down, check that my lever moves smoothly, and it does. Get its two mates in place. Checking it's still moving smoothly, that looks good. Sometimes if that setting lever has been distorted, perhaps by someone pulling on it, that can make the action of this lever stiff. But in this case it's all moving very smoothly. This has to couple here with our shutter speed setting ring, so it needs to move freely. If there's any friction at this point, typically what I do is just use a bit of graphite powder, and just take a little bit of graphite powder, drop it in where the three screw heads are running against that ring. Just work that backwards and forwards a few times. That'll just make sure that the graphite powder runs into those, works into those areas. Make sure that any excess is gone. And that's nice and free running now. It wasn't bad before. Well, I might as well show you that trick. So what's next on here? Let's have a look at my thing of parts. Right, all the flash sink mechanism needs to go in next. So basically I need to clean these components up, which really only consists of wiping everything with a bit of naphtha on a cotton bud to make sure that all the dirt and dust is gone, and these parts can be assembled. Find the two screws I'm looking for and their spring. I've got a full component of parts there. Yes, looks like it. Okay, so these parts I just need to clean quickly with a bit of naphtha. The lever at the top here is potentially the most problematic. If that's very oily, it will stick. If you get a layer of oil between the lever here and the plate it's mounted to, that would stick. And if it's sticks, it'll fail to catch the shutter, hold the shutter firmly in the cocked position, and that would cause you problems. These other components are less likely to be a problem. I'm just checking to make sure that they're free from problems. This little sector gear on the arm here, at this end it has to catch back behind another lever. That's what holds it in the cocked position, and so that at that point I put a touch of molybdenum paste on there when I assemble that. And the pallet wheel here, making sure that's clean, that revolves, it's driven by this sector gear here, and that pallet goes, the action of the pallets provides us with the little delay between firing the shutter, firing the flash connection, and releasing the shutter itself when it's set to the bulb position, the M sync. Flash bulbs are slow to ignite. They have a certain amount of time it takes for the bulb to reach peak intensity, and so to get the best joy out of flash bulbs, you give them a head start. The flash bulb is actually ignited before the shutter reaches fully open position. That's what the delay action is for here in that flash sync mechanism. Electronic flash by comparison is, for practical purposes, virtually instant, and so that triggers at the moment that the shutter blades reach fully open. Well, that's all in position now. I'm just going to put its spring in position now, which means I've got to take this spring someone's mowing their lawns right outside the house here, so that's what the background noise is. Right, so I take this spring, you see it, you hook over that post, stretch it out, and the end of the spring latches into the hole in that sector gear, and that's working nicely. Assembling the rest of this mechanism, start with this piece. I just usually wipe some molybdenum paste through there so that it'll revolve smoothly on its post. And it's on here. And that's triggered by the action of that part. The moving flash contact can go on here. Can you see any of that? Yeah, just about. Sorry if I keep moving out of range. It's the problem when you have the magnification set up high. It's very easy to move out of the working area. Let's get this settled. That looks good. Plain screw at this end of the mechanism, and at the other end of the bracket we have the return spring, and the screw here has a shoulder around it that spring sits around, and the spring should sit around that shoulder so that it's free to move, not be trapped underneath it like it currently is. Let's get that position correctly. It springs a little bit out around at that point, and so it's been trapped under that screw before. I need to get it seated, that's better. And now it's seated around there and not trapped underneath it. It's going to be seated around the shoulder on that screw. Alright, now I've got to lift this spring over. You see any of this? Let's see. So I'll hold this back. Lift that spring over. Yeah, that spring is just a little bit out of shape. It's not wanting to sit where it should do. That drops into a tiny groove. It's just done it now in the back of this lever. So that lever is now sprung loaded. And this lever latches the main drive cam in position when it's cocked. And as this lever is lifted by the shutter release, it then releases the main drive cam. And the shutter release lever at this point can go back into the shutter too. So I'll just wipe that with a bit of naphtha. And I'm just having a look at this to make sure that it's not bent. Sometimes people attempting to adjust the shutter can reach into pliers and start abusing things like that in an effort to make the shutter release quicker or later in the action of the shutter release. But whichever fault they're trying to fix, that wasn't the answer. So I'll just wipe a bit of molybdenum paste on that shaft, and this sits in position here. Going to make sure it goes underneath the B lever at this end, and then tuck the spring down into position inside the case. So that's there. Just tuck that spring down. That's it. So now you can see the action here. As I press the shutter release, you can see it lifts this arm, and that would disengage it from the main drive cam and allow the main drive cam to run down. So the main drive cam, where have I put that? Here it is. Yeah, the main drive cam and its spring. Of course, the spring in this case is too tired to be particularly useful, and I'm going to have to find another one. But the cam itself, I'm just wiping this. It's fairly generously greased up with probably graphite grease. The vast majority of the surface area on this bracket, on this little thing, of course, touch nothing, and don't require any lubricant on them. And they're the areas that tend to have the grease still on them, of course. And I will just lubricate the contact surfaces with a bit of molybdenum paste. The spring I'll put to one side. Bring this back here. Come on, video camera, keep up. Right, molybdenum paste. That curved surface there, I want some on there. These two tabs, here and here, are where it couples to the blade actuating ring, and usually I just run it up through the centre just to make sure it's lubricated on its post. And that's all that's required. Drop that into position. That's sitting in its rest position at that point. The spring would be holding it back against that post. When you cock it, you're cocking it against the spring tension. You see it comes around and latches underneath that bracket, and as you hold the shutter release, lift that off there, the spring's allowed to catch the shutter and run back with it. As the B lever here is lifted up by here, I can continue the action and close the blades. So I need to find a spring. Before I do that, I'll just put a wipe of molybdenum paste on this lever so that it latches into position smoothly. Now I've got to find a better spring, a replacement for this tired one, and yeah, that'll be fun. I've got one here. I'm not 100% sure that that's original and that's how it came from the factory, or whether somebody has bent that spring up to give it a bit more tension there, but it's certainly a much more useful looking spring, and so I'll fit that in place because there is no danger that the other one would remain working for any great length of time. It is simply too tired. The spring would be under tension for some of the range of action, but as it rotates round to the blade's closed position, it would simply not have enough tension to do its job. Now I've got to get that tab around there, right round to that point. This is always a bit entertaining, particularly when the spring has got more tension on it like this one. Let's see if I can lift that over. Yeah, that's sitting in position. Let's try that action. So I'll cock the shutter, swing that over. That allows this to drop down into position. Rotate this to the cocked position, and there's our shutter cocked, and as soon as I hit the shutter release it should fire, and it should be fairly quick. It'll be so quick that the B action can't work. There you go. It goes so quickly that the B lever didn't have a chance to drop in and prevent the action from completing. That's good. That shutter is now ready to have the retard gear train and self-timer put back in, but of course I've got to clean those. These two speed trains I typically clean by putting in a small jar of naphtha and then putting the small jar of naphtha into my ultrasonic cleaner, and the waves will just pass straight through the glass, through the naphtha, and clean those two trains. And it gets rid of any oil or dust or grease. The ultrasonic action will help break up any dirt that's in there, and they should come back nice and clean and ready to go back into the shutter. I have the speed trains back from the ultrasonic cleaner, and I've lubricated them lightly with graphite powder. So I'm just going to cock the shutter, drop the retard gear train into place, and that's held in position with two screws. This tab at this end, that needs to be pulled back because it presses against a lever on the blade actuating ring, or a little tab on the blade actuating ring, so it needs to be pulled back from there. As long as it's free to move like that, it's good. Single screw at this end. This screw goes through an oversized hole, allows you to adjust the position of this rack, this speed train, which is used to adjust the speeds by increasing or decreasing the amount of engagement you have with the main drive cam. Let's fire this. You should get about a 1 second. That was pretty quick, so I need to move my retard gear train inwards for greater engagement with the cam, which will slow it down. Let's try it again. That was more credible. I think that's probably a good place to start. I think it's probably still a bit quick, but we'll find out.